Good afternoon, all. We're here today, Ipek, Borman, Petros, Aristodemou, and Zambartas, to talk about 4 plausible futures of our island. And these are based on scenarios that were written by a team. And let me get this working. There you go. And I would like to explain here why scenarios about the future. The idea of scenarios is to spark thinking of the civic society. Up to now, it's a consensus that all the peace talks regarding the Cyprus problem have been a top-down approach where you had high-level politicians, the highest level usually, and high-level technocrats were discussing, and the public opinion was really not part of the process, or very little. With the scenarios, you give people, normal people, the compass, the idea to spark thinking on how the future could be based on our decisions today. A few words about the process. The process is, it was done using Rios Partners' Transformative scenario approach. Rios Partners is a social impact company that designs and facilitates strategies to enable groups of different stakeholders to work together to deliver fair results. And this process is not new. It's been going on for 3 decades in different parts of the world for different subjects. The scenarios, what scenarios are not are predictions. So the 4 scenarios that we are written by this group, they are not trying to predict the future, and they are not proposals either. So they more explain or describe what could it be possible, not what should be happening or what will happen. The scenario writing team found 4 scenarios that are relevant, plausible. There are many other scenarios that the team decided that they were not plausible. They're clear and challenging to the way we are thinking. Those were created by having 36 Cypriots convening together over many months in 2022, and they sat down, asked difficult questions, getting each one's perspective, and compiling all together in 4 scenarios, 2 with an agreed solution and 2 without an agreed solution by 2035. We will talk about it later. And it has to be highlighted that this was a collective process by the 36 Cypriots, and it was not in any way mediated by anybody else. It was, let's say, Rios Partners was an impartial facilitator and helped with editing the scenarios. The 36 people, they are not the usual suspects. You see 3 of us here. They're entrepreneurs, there are artists, there are lawyers, there are doctors. The group comprised of 18 Turkish-speaking Cypriots and 18 Greek-speaking Cypriots. There was a member of the LGBTI+ community. The minorities, the religious minorities of the island were also respected. We had an Armenian woman present and a Maronite woman present. And what is important to note is that everyone came as an individual with its own experiences, its own perspective, and its own input. The process came about as a question we often get. Who funded this project? The project was funded by the governments of the Netherlands, Norway via PRIO, and Finland. Yeah. And the result is 4 scenarios that the first 2 we see on the screen. They are 2 scenarios that there is no agreed solution from the 2 main communities of the island by 2035. And the next 2 ones, their way and our way, they are the 2 scenarios where the group decided it was plausible that there will be a solution reached by 2035. In the Norway world, by 2035, there is stagnation and inaction. This is just a very brief summary. You can access all the scenarios in detail at cyprusfutures.org. Now, in this scenario here, which echoes a bit today what is happening, is that the talks, the negotiation talks are not, the peace talks are not concluding. There is failure, and it results in more integration of the people in the north with Turkey, and there's more economic dependence and less social space between the 2 communities, and the division is actually getting deeper. In one sentence, we might say that the Cyprus problem deteriorates gradually throughout the years. In the world of my way, which is, I would say, a bit more radical scenario, the Cyprus problem escalates rapidly. Again, it echoes what is happening today. The Turkish Cypriots leadership basically decides that there is no way that we can find a solution with the Greek Cypriots, so we're just going to go for international engagement and recognition as an independent state by few countries of the world. Of course, there is strong action against that by the Greek Cypriots, and that doesn't help at all when it comes to the militarization of the island and the worsening of the current situation. Now, 2 scenarios that there is an agreed solution. The agreed solution that the group has concluded was federation. Yeah, we have 2 scenarios of federation, their way and our way. In the world of their way, it is again a top-down approach where the society is not prepared for this fundamental change. There is a solution. There is a federal state being created and with the 2 constituent states, but because of the lack of preparation of the people, there's still mistrust between the communities, and and the federal state basically is too weak to be able to deal with its federal responsibilities. We could say that in this scenario, by 2035, the Cyprus problem is actually solved only superficially. And finally, we have a scenario of resilient peace. This is where the civil society is much more involved in the whole peace process, and we have an understanding by the majority of the people of the interdependence of the 2 main communities of the island. And this is where the transformation of the Cyprus problem happens. You can find the possible, these plausible and possible futures of Cyprus with this QR code or at the cyprusfutures.org. I will pass the floor to Ipek and Petros, that they will be talking about the drivers, mainly governance, and how each one of us can direct the future to one of these scenarios. Thank you.
So, thank you, Marco. It's a wonderful introduction. Well, in Cyprus, we have not been doing a good job in looking back, actually. We've been very selective with our recollections and with our looking back at our past. Sure, we went through colonialism. We have a history going back millennia. We had the can we restore the slides, please? Sorry. Thank you. We have the formation of our back communal state in 1960. We have the events of the 60s and 70s that have been traumatic to both communities. And since then, each community has been very selective about what needs to be remembered. But actually, we should be looking back, and we should be looking at the whole picture, not half the picture. We should, which is the one next to this one. We should be learning from our history. We should be learning from our mistakes. We should affirm our values. We should honor our ancestors. We should learn how to forgiveness. We need to let go. We need to move on.
Thank you. No, this doesn't. Oh, it's okay. Yes, we are not very good at looking back, but we are not also very good at looking forward. So we just wanted to, we talk about scenarios. Marcos explained what they are not and what they are. So scenarios are stories about the future, but plausible futures. So what is the value of looking forward? What is the value of scenario-based futures? Can we, sorry. Yeah, so by looking forward, by looking at the future, we are able to reflect on actual possibilities and choices to identify upcoming threats and risks, and to be able to develop shared visions to mobilize for collective action. Yes, now Petros will start by...
Thank you. So the topic of the conference being transparency and governance actually ties in quite well with our scenarios, because it goes back to the core of what drives society, what drives our world, and where we could end up in 15 years' time. So if we go to the scenario of Norway, where we have repeated attempts to restart the peace negotiation, where they're continuing to fail, then we have a situation on one side where the North becomes increasingly dependent on Turkey. We have perhaps increasing executive powers of the presidency, more opaque processes, less transparency, more nepotism. But on the other hand, in the South, with a deteriorating security situation, then we kind of almost legitimize bad practice by justifying, substandard management, and so governance is inextricably linked with the way what the future brings. To move a step further, in my way, we have a rapid deterioration in the relations between the two communities, where the security situation possibly gets much worse. Perhaps the North will start relying on third countries, even outside Turkey, to bring investors, and then we may have dependencies. We may have cases where there's corruption and there's influence of money moving in, and we have maybe the few people benefiting from this and leaving the rest of society not benefiting from this relationship. On the South, again, a disconnect between society and the leadership can kind of even does not allow for a healthy democracy. It does not allow for the opposition to bring the government into account, because there's always a continuous distraction from what should be happening in a healthy and normal democracy.
Yeah, in their way scenario, so it's a scenario of peace under pressure. So the peace is, mainly brought upon the island by the external actors. So it's a top-down and external-led process. So, and we suddenly find ourselves in a federation. So this is a federation, of course, within the EU, with little effort devoted to building effective federal institutions, as political elites, leaderships mainly focus on ensuring strong constituent states to protect their communities' interests, because the communities' interests and the constituent states' interests come for them first and foremost. So this leads to reduced legitimacy of and limited public faith in federal institutions, and to people's loyalties being primarily directed to constituent states. Almost in every discussion with regard to federation, this is a fear that comes up by Cypriots. So are we ready to live together? Are we ready to work together? What happens if we suddenly find ourselves in a solution where we are not ready? So this directly, relates to those fears. And in our way, which is a scenario of resilient peace, we also have, of course, external actors' pressure, or let's say motivation, but that is also combined by internal dynamics. So there is also political leadership engaged in the process, as well as civil engagement in the process. So a federation within the EU, but this time with effective and legitimate public institutions at the federal level in place, as well as at the constituent state level, with mechanisms for constructive dispute resolution and coordination, and including participatory governance, human rights, and social cohesion, facilitated by and resulting in increased trust and collaboration at different levels. And here, women and youth play an active role in governance and decision-making as a result of a culture, a practice of trust building and reconciliation being built throughout the process up until the establishment of the federation. So Cypriots do not find themselves, in one night at a federation, but they become part of the designing of that process and the, implementation of the process.
What have we learned from this exercise in terms of government and transparency and accountability? If we dream of a future, if we consider a future where we allow people to participate in the evolution into a resilient bazonal bifederal state, bicommunal state, where people feel that they have ownership of the state, where politicians feel that they're accountable to the people that vote for them, where there are no security issues, there is no nationalism, there is no populism, then the checks and balances do work, and people can hope and they can aspire to a truly transparent state. On the other hand, if there is an agreed solution, but there's little trust to the institutions. And if politicians resort to playing nationalistic tunes to appeal to their electorate, then that shifts the discussion away from governance and more towards more nationalistic and more, and it can kind of distract from the issues of running a place. In worst case, in the worst scenarios where there is no agreed solution, the increased security concerns may even legitimize bad practice by saying, look, we're a state in the middle of a crisis. These are secondary issues. We should concentrate on our real issues, and really kind of achieve much worse performance in terms of where we should be.
Relate the scenarios to choices. So scenarios do not materialize, of course, as if by magic. I mean, what we call as a future is not an out there reality being generated automatically, you know, by itself. It's something that is evolving at the moment. It's happening at the moment. So, and we are part of it. We are preparing the ground for it. So in that sense, scenarios become realities through the choices, actions, and reactions of numerous civic and political stakeholders, gradually nudging systems in specific directions. So it's the human agency, actually, which is making scenarios or a future happening. So therefore we want, can we go back? Sorry. Therefore we want to show that stakeholders can regain agency over Cyprus's future direction by reflecting on how the choices they make today, or the actions they take, or the inactions they don't take, how these how these could enable futures which they value. So here we try to contrast the choices different stakeholders might make on the path toward my way versus our way. So, for example, if we take the my way scenario, what do the leaders of both communities do? They prioritize protection and enhancement of current political structures. Whereas in our way scenario, the leaders prioritize establishment of an inclusive and results-oriented peace processes. When we come to the UN, for example, in my way scenario, the UN go through the motions of a high-level peace process, as it is doing now, and declaring deadlock eventually. Whereas in our way scenario, the UN facilitates multi-track peace building with parallel focus on confidence building and substantive talks. So civil society is not compromised here. There are parallel talks which are equally important, of course, the formal track and the informal track. European Union as a stakeholder, in my way scenario, EU forgets that there is an unsolved conflict in Cyprus and gradually disbands programs for the Turkish Cypriot community. Whereas in our way scenario, EU designs and supports initiatives for island-wide cohesion now and in a settlement while preparing integration of North into EU acquis. When we look at the guarantor states, in the My Way scenario, guarantors focus on their own rights, on their own interests over Cypriot territories and strategic assets, whereas in Our Way scenario, they focus on their responsibility to promote peace, cohesion, and unity among Cypriots. Civil society as an important stakeholder here. In My Way scenario, of course, civil society gets tired and having many structural daily basis problems. So what happens? Civil society starts to defocus from pursuit of peace and turn toward other civic causes, other daily structural problems. Whereas in Our Way scenario, civil society collaborates and develops shared visions for collective action. And lastly, when we look at diaspora communities, we see that in My Way scenario, they stay in cultural bubbles or post-conflict. But in Our Way scenario, they become drivers of future and peace.
This concludes the presentation. We have time for comments or questions, so please. Any questions? Yes, Cleopatra.
Where are you today with the scenarios, and what are the next steps? How are you mobilizing key stakeholders?
The scenarios are agreed and published. They're on the website. And now it's a matter of dissemination of the information. That's why we're here today. And also we try to get in contact with interested parties like embassies or organized civilians, political parties. We have a meeting at the presidential palace coming up, and basically try to get this thought-provoking process more wide. It's not necessarily an easy endeavor, but there are some of us, of the original team, that they're more active than others.
I shouldn't say good luck because it's part of our future. I should say I wish good success in getting the messages out there and getting involvement of people in an actionable way.
So as you rightly said, it's our future together. So actually, we do not see these scenarios. We do not see ourselves as the owners of these scenarios. We just came together, and prepared a set of scenarios for the future, that might hold. A different group of 36 people would probably come up with a different set of scenarios. What we would like to achieve here is that, we read and we embrace those ideas in order to stimulate a public discussion on what the future holds in strategic terms, and realize that actually, the actions or inactions of every one of us, will lead us somewhere. Whether we like it or not. So it's in our hands, and we want to, reach to as many people as we can. And in that sense, we also, ask for help in disseminating these scenarios, because, as I said, we don't see ourselves as the owners of these scenarios. As Cleopatra may be, you can open up a discussion in your own, circle, among your friends, and ask about the scenarios. Have they read them? Are they familiar with them? And maybe, start a discussion about them. So, of course, we were facilitated by REOS Partners. It's the international group. They are professionals. We are not professionals in that sense. We are a bunch of volunteers. These things need other means as well to be able to promote the idea. You need funding, you need, a structure, and etc. So we are doing, of course, as individuals, as much as we can, but we need collaboration and support of everyone, of all Cypriots, or other, international stakeholders who would like to see a future they value.
Well, the interesting thing about this exercise is that imagine having 36 people. This is not the first bicommunal project, but what was different here is that we had people that were on the polar opposite of the ideological spectrum. So we would have people that would be pro a two-state solution, people that voted against the Annan Plan and they were against the federation. You had people that were for a federation, and you had all these people together for 2 4-day seminars in a small village in the middle of Austria with nothing else to do, and we just have to talk and discuss things. And because the Cyprus problem is primarily a human problem, fortunately, there's no ongoing war, and the things that we have to resolve are very much at a human level. So by analyzing people's hopes and fears and concerns, in coming up with these 4 scenarios, we actually delineated a lot of the driving factors. For example, no one has ever brought up considered that a solution, agreed solution, could be a number of many things. We also, there's an agreed solution, therefore it's fine. Well, no, it isn't. So, and it's interesting to see, taking into account the people that voted no in the Annan Plan, okay? So what was their concern? And they were concerned about a weak state with no public legitimacy, people being more aligned towards nationalistic, more ethnic causes. And within the group, we had experts in peace building, we had experts in geopolitics, we had people that brought a lot of expertise in. So we went back and said, so what would differentiate that scenario from a scenario that could result in a good outcome for everyone? So I think this is a very useful political exercise, trying to compare and contrast the different futures and what we could do now that could affect how things would develop for everyone. And it's actually simple things like instituting a societal dialogue, trying to get to the root of things, trying to get to the cause of things. In this conference today, we've talked about a historical dialogue, going back, looking at what happened, bringing up realities that we as society, as communities, we prefer to ignore. But we need to go back and look at these things and do all these things so we can all move forward. And we can't just do it on our own. We didn't think that it was realistic that society would just kind of revolt and bring peace. That would not be possible. So we do need help from the UN, from the EU, from organizations, so we can make societal dialogue possible, and we can allow it to inform the political leadership so we can take that step forward.
Thank you, Petros. Yes, Erhan.
questions. Since you've been involved in such a transformative exercise, and you also were following the previous panel, I am wondering if these transformative exercises will be useful in other fields when it comes to Cyprus. For example, climate-related issues, environment, energy security. So since you were part of this whole exercise, do you think there is benefit in continuing in these sort of transformative exercises? Thank you.
The approach that was followed, if it could be utilized for specific matters like energy, climate, I believe it would be a huge step forward. It's through this process, the invincible becomes visible, and immediately there is clarity. And by going through scenarios, you can really reach consensus. So in that sense, yes, if there is the funding and the stakeholders to take part, then I believe there would be results published. Yes, yes. Yes, Nicola.
Well done, guys, for a great presentation. I'm also part of the scenario team, although maybe from the non-very active members. Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean, all this time, how useful are these scenarios at this time? Because we're in on a political level, things are not moving since 2017, and it seems that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, at least in the near future. So, I mean, the scenarios, as Marcos said, it's a thought-provoking exercise. I mean, it's for people who haven't made up their mind yet, or are, you know, thinking what to decide or what to vote in a referendum, or who to vote as their leader when, you know, what the problem is. There will be developments in the Cyprus issue. But maybe when the time comes, if the time comes for, you know, negotiations and then maybe a plan, these scenarios, if they are kept, you know, alive and are being updated constantly, maybe they will be very useful. But also in the meantime, so that, you know, I always say that in 2004, the two communities were complete strangers. The borders were closed for 30 years, and, you know, things were progressing on a political level, but it would be very difficult to work. We didn't know each other. Then in 2017, it was better, but again, there was no, you know, integration. Now things are much better, and maybe tools like the scenarios will further, you know, develop the mindset of people to make them more mature, you know, in selecting their leaders and maybe eventually vote in a referendum. I don't know what you think about these thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is one thing, though. Of course, scenarios are not only limited to the Cyprus problem or, you know, a potential peace process or the political status quo. It speaks about every aspect of the life. Of course, within the parameters of that given scenario. So even if, let's say, there is this barren political space at the moment, I mean, with regard to a settlement or a solution, there are, you know, many aspects of life in those scenarios that we can work on. So, but, you know, people, I mean, I know it from myself, we don't generally think about future in concrete terms. We just have a main idea of what we would like to happen. or what kind of future we would like to have, or whether we want a federation or not as a slogan. We do not try to, pave the road towards, to have a full path towards that goal. For example, when they first, one of the facilitators first asked me, what do I think about the upcoming 5 years in concrete terms, what will happen? I couldn't answer for a while. I said, I have to think. Well, what do you have to, think about? I mean, you have a clear goal in your mind. You want, for example, a resilient peace to happen in your ideal world by 2013. But I was not able to, identify the drivers or the parameters of that goal I have in mind. So, but when we started to talk about those concrete steps, what kind of, steps we can take, for example, personally, with respect to women, women's rights, empowerment of women, and etc., you become aware of the fact that thinking about the future, immediate or medium-term future, really gives you the tools to be able to move ahead. Because at the moment, I think we all feel stuck, right? Stuck, don't know what to do. Yes, we have this past, but as if we don't have a future. But actually, that future is coming. It's approaching, and we are in it at the moment. So we can use scenarios in order to stimulate public discussion on everything, I think, and that would be my...
Thank you, Ipek. I need to close the session now. We can still have a conversation outside. Thank you for your attention.